Welcome to Women of Steel with me, Miriam Grace, the podcast where women who've had their mettle tested help us make important links for ourselves. I talk to remarkable women about their lives and challenges through the lens of my own work as a psychotherapist. We uncover stories which challenge the power of the status quo and validate the voices of marginalised or disadvantaged women. I'm now going to read from today's guest. Although lesbian characters have been present since the early history of television, they have often been portrayed in negative light. Initially, these characters were limited to villain roles, where they preyed on young straight women until they died violently. Lesbian characters were expendable and easily written off, making them easy characters to hate. In more recent years, a growing number of shows have contained lesbian representation, and by the numbers, things look to be improving. While the increase in representation is no trivial feat, the messaging surrounding these characters also needs to be addressed. Studies have shown that messaging about a marginalised group can impact how someone in that group sees themselves. Negative messaging can impact the self-esteem of an individual and shift how they view themselves. While the quantity of lesbian characters has grown over the years, that does not mean that the ways these characters are portrayed has improved since the early days of television, and many stereotypes and tropes still exist today. That was a quote from Michaela Johnson, who undertook research into lesbian representation on TV for her master's thesis. I'm grateful for her work, which has helped me in my own work. And this episode is a recording of our first proper conversation after messaging for some time about the issues that concern us. Just as I grew up with Anne in the famous Five missing out on the action because she was a girl, Michaela studied how when lesbians eventually arrived on the scene, they were still not the main characters or involved in central plot lines. We discussed some of the shows that portray lesbian characters and their impact, and their influence on all women and on society's perception of lesbians in particular. Oh, welcome, Michaela. We were just discussing the timings, weren't we? Because you're near Washington, DC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
We're on the East Coast.
Yeah, so our summertime timings are really confusing for anybody that I work with in America, and they're really confusing for me as well. So I'm really
They are not fun.
So thank you for joining us today. And I was saying just before we switched the record button on that today I'm going to have a conversation with you that I've wanted to have with you for a couple of years, and I found you online when I was searching for something specific, and we never got round to that conversation because of life, and so now we're going to have our conversation. But I think that it's so interesting what we're going to talk about that some of the podcast listeners will enjoy just eavesdropping on our conversation. But before we start, just tell me a little bit about where you are, what work you're doing, what's happening around you, what's the atmosphere like near DC at the moment.
Interesting, I would say. I think everyone, just trying to get through, I think everyone day-to-day life, just with a few more protests, wiggled in there. I think it's okay. I think it's improved since January. But yeah, just trying to get through every day. But just doing okay.
Yeah, and is the cherry blossom out yet? Because I think Washington itself is quite famous for the blossom trees, isn't it?
Yeah, they peaked a couple weeks ago. I chose not to deal with the crowds and the traffic that the cherry blossom spraying. But the great thing is that their seeds are kind of scattered everywhere around the
Mm,
area. So
mm,
you get an errant cherry blossom here and there. So it was
mm,
beautiful. But
mm.
they last like their peak is like 2 days, and then they very quickly all their flowers
Right.
die
Oh,
off.
okay.
So,
Well, that's helpful
yeah.
to know because I've not been to Washington DC, and I'm sad because I don't think I keep thinking, oh, I meant to go around, this time of year and see the cherry blossom. If it's only for 2 days, the odds of me actually getting there, even had the politics been a little bit more conducive, aren't very high. Anyway, so shall we get on to
Sure.
people might have guessed a little bit about what we're going to talk about because the title of this episode is From Dead to Femme, and that in fact was the title of your thesis, and this is for a master's degree, wasn't it? Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about where you were studying and what piqued your interest generally on your in your studies on your course, and then we'll get on to why specifically this area.
Yeah, sure. So I got my master's degree through Johns Hopkins University.
Mm,
They have a great online program, which is what I did.
mm,
And I initially, being in my mid-20s, having a little crisis, was like, what if I go back to school and become a college professor?
mm,
So the way in the US it works, if you don't pursue a STEM degree, is you have to do your master's and your PhD separately. And I really love media studies. I
mm,
studied that in undergrad, and so I wanted to continue to pursue that, as well as kind of set myself up for maybe eventually writing a PhD thesis. So my degree specifically is in communications research, and then the topic that is just a passion of mine.
mm.
Because if you're writing 70 pages of something, you really should be passionate about it.
Yes, absolutely.
But
So our straight listeners might not understand the terms "dead to femme." It's sort of is quite obvious to me as a lesbian, but yeah, I guess I'm fairly newly out, 10 years or so out. But yeah,
mhm,
15 years ago, I wouldn't have known what that meant. So could you explain?
yeah. So there are two very major stereotypes within lesbian representation, which is the dead lesbian, um, which I can get into, really blew up. Conversations around it really blew up around 2015, 2016,
Mhm.
with the death of a major lesbian character in a very popular show. And then there's the femme lesbian, which has been around forever.
Mm,
Um, I found research talking about the L word criticizing the femme lesbian from like
mm, mm,
2006,
mm,
which is kind of just what it sounds like, a very feminine lesbian that is
mm,
very straight passing
mm.
and more often than not leans more towards the male gaze. It's a very
Yeah,
like non-threatening, non-controversial lesbian character that is palatable for straight audiences.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Palatable. So we have these two extremes, and my area of writing, and the reason that I was looking for something like your writing was because I'm researching and looking into how it is that some women don't even recognize their own sexuality,
Mhm.
and they can be very criticized for that. How could you not know? How could you not know? But if you go back just into recent history, one of the very many answers to how people don't know lies in this what we call lesbian visibility, and that means whether we can see ourselves. So there's a saying about, have you heard this about people who are in glass closets? Have you heard that
Mhm.
saying? Yeah. So a lesbian, I'm saying for the listeners, a lesbian who is in a glass closet, that would be a woman who sort of looks like the stereotype, the butch lesbian, and so she's more likely, sometimes through verbal abuse, but also through being able to see that type of lesbian out there, she's more likely to be able to question her sexuality and think, am I gay? And I think that there's a lot of sort of in the middle or femme lesbians who perhaps can't see themselves out there, or certainly couldn't when they were growing up, who who would either think, well, I can't be because I'm not wearing leather, and I don't have my head shaved or something, no visible piercings, or as was the case certainly with my generation, there was also the thing about I want children. So it was just an assumption there that therefore you must be straight. Something about I don't know, lesbians are maternal or something bizarre like that. So there was this representation, and you and I are I can't do the maths now, about 30 years apart, nearly. But even when you were growing up, what was the representation like? What were you seeing on the TV? What were you watching?
It was very little up until my teens, probably,
Mm.
or yeah, probably my teens. I look at, something like Steven Universe, and I'm like, this would have been so life-changing if I saw this when
Mm.
I was
Mm.
7, 8 years old,
Mm.
to like
Mm.
point to and identify, oh, I'm like this.
Mm.
Um, because yeah, it really started. I remember so vividly being like 14, 15 and seeing Emily on Pretty Little Liars or Santana
Mm.
on Glee and being
Mm.
like, oh, I can really see myself in this.
Mm.
But yeah, that was like early teens. Or even South of Nowhere, which is, I'm not sure, a show that is in the UK. It's a Canadian show.
No, I don't
And
know
that
that
is
one.
like a very lesbian forward show with femme
Mm.
lesbians.
Mm.
Um, but it like seeing something like that was very eye-opening for me.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it really wasn't. I'm very jealous of kids now, be able to see themselves and identify themselves at an earlier age.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny you should say Glee, because obviously Glee is sort of was a teenagers sort of program, but
Mhm.
I think Glee was one of my shows because my daughters are about your age, so we all used to watch Glee together, and
Nice.
and it was just so fab because the issues didn't tend to be about the person's sexuality, but there was a lot of diversity in
Mhm.
all sorts of ways and all sorts of characters. And the other thing that was out at a really similar time was when Orange is the New Black came out,
Mhm.
and I remember the first time I watched it, sort of feeling like I was. It is to do with my upbringing, and I haven't got time to go into the details of it, but feeling like I was watching something a bit wrong or a bit bad or a bit edgy. But of course, once you've seen episode one, yeah, you have to carry on being a bit bad, whatever that means. But that was the internalized homophobia. And again, for people listening who aren't up with all the terminology, it's a really similar thing to what you might understand as internalized racism. And it's where you've absorbed the cultural values, even against yourself. And that's one of the other reasons that I'm writing about, that causes women not to necessarily see themselves or recognize themselves. So you've named some shows, and I saw Pretty Little Liars, and that was a fab show, wasn't it? I mean,
Mhm.
that was really how old were you when you saw Pretty Little Liars? Can you remember?
I think, oh gosh, don't quote me on this one. I should know this. I think it came out in 2010. So
Mm.
I was 16. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 15, 16.
Yeah, yeah. So what was the methodology on your thesis? Did you have to find, did you get a box set? Were you streaming it? How did you get hold of all the episodes, and what did you have to do with those episodes to analyze them?
Yeah, so luckily I think all the shows I picked were on a streaming service. I think they
Mm,
were all on Netflix at the time,
mm,
or Pretty Little Liars was on ABC Family
mm,
streaming still, or Hulu. That's probably correct. Sorry, it's been a few years since the
mm.
research.
Yeah.
But basically, it was a lot of. I think I watched this full season, the seasons in full twice of each
Mm,
show, and the first one to just kind of like notate episodes that more prominently focused on the lesbian
mm,
characters, any
mm,
like initial thoughts that I had. The
mm,
second time was just kind of like a second pass to make sure I didn't miss
mm,
anything. And then really just identifying specific episodes that I
mm,
wanted to focus on.
mm,
And I was just watching those episodes a lot and really
mm,
kind of and understanding what was being shown to me and why, and also what conclusions could I bring
mm,
from,
mm, mm,
what I'm looking at, and also just making sure that um, going back like after I'm like, okay, I think that Pretty Little Liars has these themes in it about, or like
mm,
these certain stereotypes. I have to go
mm,
back and double check my work because
mm,
I could just be blending a bunch of things together. So that's kind of the methodology is
mm.
uh, I had friends being like, oh, so you're just watching TV? And I was like, this isn't a fun way to watch TV. I
No,
wouldn't
no,
recommend this for
no.
anyone if you want to go crazy for a summer. But uh, yeah, it was a lot of just like double checking that what I was seeing was correct and I wasn't just making based assumptions because like I did watch Pretty Little Liars when it was first airing.
Mm, mm.
Like how many years later, 10 years later, my memory's foggy. So I have to be like, I have to go in kind of like a blank slate again.
Yeah, yes. So as a teenager, when you saw Emily, what sort of feelings or emotions, or how did that impact you personally? How did that, do you think that helped you, or do you think it skewed your view, or was that a good experience to have Emily?
Initially, yes.
Mm,
I think one of the things I really related to her was at the start of the show, she had a boyfriend and
mm,
that she
mm,
was dating him, but she never really seemed interested in him or his
mm.
life or his feelings. And I dated boys in high school and I had a very similar experience where I was like, I guess
Mm,
this is what you're supposed to do. I
mm,
guess my anxiety, what I
mm,
realized was anxiety, I thought was like feelings of a crush.
mm,
And so I think seeing someone like that, um, who had a boyfriend who had previously experienced with men
mm,
or boys because they're teenagers, have this realization of like, oh, you are supposed to like have interest in your partner's feelings, have interest in your
mm,
partner's interests
mm,
was very helpful and very eye-opening. And I also think it was interesting to have a little bit of a gray area with her family. It
mm,
wasn't outrightly no get out of the house, but it also
mm.
wasn't like, oh, we 100% accept you. There was like a growing period,
Yeah.
which I think you don't often see, or I didn't often see at the time. And so I think it was nice to see that, to be
Yes.
like, hey, there are going to be growing pains. It
Yeah.
might not be an immediate kick out, but like this could happen.
Mm. Yes. It
Which I
was
think
real.
was really great for the time.
Yeah, it was realistic in that sense,
Mhm.
because I think if someone had said to you, you know, obviously, here's a TV program, and it's so easy to come out, and there's no hassle with it. It's cool these days. You'd have known in your senses that's not always the case. And i
Mhm.
think i think there's something about my writing that I just feel is a bit controversial, because I'm writing really about the trauma of coming out, and I don't know that that's wanted by anybody really, because people want to think it's all wonderful and rainbows and pride marches and so on,
Mhm.
and I think it can feel like that initially, but sooner or later there's this coming to settle into the sense that it is great relationship wise, it really is, but you're in a minority group now, girl. I mean, you are as a woman anyway, but you're in a minority group, and that really sucks. That is wearing and tiring, and 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 that's it.
Hmm.
There's, this is part of reality. So for that to land, you know, it's not a really good advert, is it? uh, so I don't
Hmm.
think it's not something that people want to put forward, unless, like you say, it's in this really, there's that extreme way of the, I was talking to crime writer, sapphic writer, a few days ago, Carrie Hunter, and she was saying that the crime fiction she was reading, if there were gay characters, they were either sort of I don't know, stereotypes, or she said just bloody miserable. She said, just like, really, really miserable. And I think there's something about, it's something in the middle, it's
Hmm.
like there's positives for sure. And it's not an easy thing. And 20, I was going to say, it's even with it being 2025, but 2025 could mean it's actually harder at the moment. But say 2024, it still wasn't easy for women coming out then. I just
Hmm.
thought of a couple of shows that I have actually watched Grey's Anatomy all the way through, every episode of every series, and Station 19, and I've watched Grey's twice through. I think my daughters are like on to the third or fourth, this sort of addiction to these people being their friends. And that's, for me, has been a very happy experience of seeing relationships portrayed as not, highly dramatic or highly sexualized and so on, but they're still very, I'm trying to think, do any of the lesbians on there have short hair? I don't think so. I think we've still got the long hair and the makeup
Hmm.
on there. Um, so again, like you say, male gaze, again, for people listening, um, is about um, oh, looking in a way that is supposed to be or considered to be attractive to men, and this is one of the more sinister sides, I think, of some of the representations of lesbians, is sometimes that it's to sell a series or to sell a book or to sell a film, something like that, that as you the word you used was, is women are made, or lesbians are made more palatable, so that straight men can enjoy that, and that's a bit not okay. Yeah. Oh,
Hmm.
how would you phrase that, Michaela? I'm sure you've got a little bit more of an academic
Mm,
way of saying that.
I think I think that it's frustrating because I don't want to be palatable to men. I don't know
No.
if this is a good way to say it, but it's just like I live my life outside of men,
Mm,
and to
mm,
have to watch, I think it was very tough too as a I'm not a butch lesbian, I'm not a femme lesbian. I sit
mm.
somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that just trying to figure out style, identity, things like this, how I should look and
Mm,
act,
mm,
it took me so long to figure out that I don't have to look hyper feminine.
mm,
Um, I don't know, that was kind of an all over the place answer, but it is
mm,
just like, it is just very funny to have to be palatable or
mm,
uncontroversial when it's like
mm.
my existence is controversial to these men because
Yeah.
I don't think about them at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it is just a very like it's a contradiction, I think, with like the lived reality and then like what you see on TV.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I'm sure it is really different coming out at the different ages that you and I came out at. But for me, the whole lot of the process You know, what it wasn't just about sexuality, it was really a pushback against being told how to be per se, about everything, about housework, about childcare, about how I dress, how I look, what I say, what I want to do with my life, and who I want to be partnered with. So it's this, it's really frustrating to come up against this. It's like a hitting back into your past. It's like turning round and being met with that, and it's still this judgment on that it's the visual that is attractive, and that's true for a percentage of people, but across the board it isn't always what somebody looks like that is
Mhm.
is attractive to people. So I mean that would cut quite a few men out as well. I assume that they're not all, they're not always visual. So there's something about being ourselves and being authentic. And, I love that I can, walk around the house with, I tend to be dressed on the top because I might be on a Zoom like this. But, if I'm wearing pajama bottoms, I don't know why, but one leg's sort of up round the knee and one's down by the ankle, and my legs aren't shaved, and so on. But I don't feel not gorgeous. I actually feel better about my body and how I look now. I'm not observing myself through the lens.
Mhm.
And one of the things when I was using your work, I was doing a presentation, a paper for a conference, and I called mine 50 Shades of Misogyny. And when I was looking, I thought I'll just go to Cosmopolitan magazine and just sort of screenshot a cover just so that I can illustrate a point. And I was really shocked. I think this is 2023. I was really shocked that they were still doing this thing. So on the magazine, it said things like, this is for women, directed at women, but sex moves he'll never forget, meaning, now, like, why wouldn't that be sex moves you'll never forget? But it's not about your sex life is not about your pleasure. It's about you know, a man's pleasure, and then you'll get pleasure from the fact that he won't forget the sex, not from the sex, and
Mhm.
and all sorts of really, I couldn't believe that in the 2020s there was a magazine still saying, oh, there was something like how to pin down his love with this move. So again, it's like how to use sex to get loved.
Mhm.
So there's this way that we're all taught growing up, whether we are straight or bisexual or lesbian, all of us go through this training, which is keep your man happy, keep a man's love. And then there's absolutely when if you come to be fortunate enough to have a relationship with a woman, there's absolutely no information on on what you're supposed to do with that.
Oh yeah, it's a full guessing game, and you're just like, and you're both going through the same thing of like, well, we know how to, you know,
No,
like trying to, we know how to do this with men, even like theoretically, but with each
yeah,
other,
yeah,
uh, I think that's why they always say like when you first come out, it's like you're a teenager again because
yeah.
you have to relearn everything. And even like I came out as a teenager, so I feel like I skipped some
Mm.
that,
Mm.
but like you do hear that with like, people coming out at any age where they're like, I have to relearn
Yeah,
how to flirt. I have to relearn all the signs of being interested in someone
yeah.
or just going on a date. It's wild that yeah, still in this time in this decade, it's still very
Mm.
male centric.
Yeah, I'm really sort of touched to hear that, because I think I just assumed it was older women that felt like teenagers again. And some of what I've been, working with and thinking is I think that we literally have to grow new neural pathways in our brain, because the the sort of the straight pathways, how to be a good wife to a husband, they're growing from, from babyhood, and we've got a lot of information, a lot of, a lot of stuff there, and then nothing. So then, we come back to this lesbian visibility. And yes, although my shows, I have to say, have you seen either Grey's Anatomy or Station 19?
I've seen Grey's Anatomy, but I stopped. I could talk about how mad I was with how they'd handled Callie in Arizona for 4 hours.
That was hard. Yeah, talk now. Not for 4 hours. We haven't got 4 hours, but for 4 minutes. Tell me, because was it's a while since I've seen it now. But Callie was bisexual, wasn't she?
Mhm.
Is that the way they handled that?
No, it was more, I think also because when I watched Callie in Arizona, I was younger, and so I didn't really understand how, like, Grey's Anatomy essentially is a soap opera. And
Mm,
so there's always has to be a conflict. People can't be happy for too long.
mm,
But I was really frustrated because it was so nice to see like these two women who like got through so much trauma together. They worked so hard, they fought for each other, they have a kid together.
mm,
And for it to just to fall apart in a way that I just didn't find satisfying. And there was like a custody battle. And
mm,
then I kind of just stopped paying attention because I was like,
mm.
I think because I also was younger when I watched it, and it was so important to me to see them that when they started falling apart, I like took it very personally.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was just like, I don't want to do this. Now I can say, oh, it's a soap opera. Yeah, they're, of course, no
Mm,
one's, the straight
mm.
people on that show aren't happy for very long, too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yes, that's
it's
true.
still a wound.
Yeah, I can really see that. And it is so interesting that I'm interviewing you so closely after interviewing Carrie Hunter, the author that I mentioned earlier, because she was saying that she said she finds it really hard to write um, characters that aren't very nice or that are having rows and arguing with each other, because that's not her experience, and and she's a bit sort of sick of that. So her women tend to get on, although she sometimes says she does have to put in a bit a bit of an action scene just to get the reader engaged. Oh, you need to switch if Gray's sort of upset you. Go over to station 19. There's some nice stuff in there. So I'm thinking that it might be good for us to take a break,
Sure.
and when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the importance and the impact and the work that you've done, and and really what you would like to, if it could change something out there, what you'd like it to change. So let's take a break now, and we'll come back after that.
Are you coming out later in life? Are you partnered with someone who is? The Women with Women Conference has you covered. Meet like-minded people and hear from authors, therapists and specialists at a beautiful venue in Sheffield. The first Women with Women Conference is set for June 2025, and with limited spaces, tickets are available at womenofsteel.co.uk. We'll see you there. This event is not open to men or straight people.
Welcome back after the break, and I'm here talking to Michaela Johnson, who I found online because she had written a thesis called From Dead to Femme, and we've been talking a little bit about lesbians on TV and the stereotypes and glass closet lesbians and so on. And I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about the importance of this work, and I really am full of admiration for you for picking this topic. I'm so grateful because you've done a whole load of work I now don't need to do, um, and for really applying your good brain to this stuff. Why was it important back in 2021 for you to study this?
I think I always wanted to write something like this. Television, lesbian characters on television were so important to me uh, when I was a teenager, and even now I still would prefer to see shows with lesbians in them.
Mm,
And it was always something that I love to talk about. It was something that would always be on my mind. And so when I had the opportunity to write something, I knew I wanted to do it. I had a very clear vision of I wanted to do it I wanted to write for television shows between 2010 and 2020 because
mm,
I was a teenager in that decade, and I knew I wanted to talk about lesbians specifically. Because I think when you watch enough representation on TV, you really start to pick up uh, the stereotypes and the themes, the common themes throughout every
mm,
representational character that you watch, because they are not subtle,
mm,
especially with
mm,
teen media. And so I
mm,
just really wanted to see what changed in a decade. A
mm,
lot of the research that I found, even before my own thesis, was from the early 2000s or late 1990s. I couldn't really find anything I was looking for this decade specifically, other than talking about the 100 with Lexa. And I was like, everyone has exhausted this topic specifically. Let's take a wider look at
mm.
representation in general. Um, so I was really passionate about it and excited about it because I also just wanted to be helpful, hopefully helpful, seemingly like with my own thesis, to be like, here's some more recent research that's been done.
Yeah.
We don't have to keep talking about the L word forever.
Mm, yes, yes, yes. And I think, I'm thinking as well, there'll be straight women, of course, listening to this podcast. And, if we look at it in broad terms, it's not, we're not just being told how to be as lesbians, we're being told how to be as women. And something that we might have time to just touch on at the end is really about media today, which I think the age that you are, you did just escape the being in your teens with a smartphone. Am I right?
Yes, I didn't get a smartphone till I was 18.
Mm, mm,
And that was social media was also very new at
yeah.
18. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, be grateful for small mercies. I think. I think the TV does have enough of an influence on us, doesn't it? I mean, I grew up with three TV channels, um, and we didn't even have VHS video when I was growing up. So and that was enough to deal with. That was enough brainwashing to handle. What was the conclusion? What is lesbian representation on TV like?
it's a mix of old and new.
Mm,
It's a good way to put it. It's still a lot of femme lesbians.
mm,
Um, Even, I mean, I could name characters from shows that aired last year that had femme lesbians. I think
mm,
that's just going to be, unfortunately, still very predominant.
mm.
Um, and and I think the other thing that I found um, was that it was improving. I think that when I looked at Pretty Little Liars, Jane the Virgin, and One Day at a Time.
Mm,
And something that I found with Pretty Little Liars and Jane the Virgin that had some overlap in their
mm,
airing time
mm,
was that their lesbian characters were very much sidelined from main plot. Emily is
mm.
one of the four main girls. You would be shocked how little she is involved in A plot lines after
Right,
season one. They
right.
don't really know what to do with her after season one, and she doesn't really have all of her other friends are getting blackmailed and threatened by A all the time. Not so
Yeah,
much Emily.
yeah.
That's the same with Louisa and Jane the Virgin. Her
Mm,
whole plot line with her abusive girlfriend,
mm,
very much separate from the main plot line,
mm,
and only every once in a while pops in
mm,
from the main storyline.
mm,
Um,
mm,
but an improvement was One Day at a Time. Elena is a main character who is very much involved in the everyday. She has a lot of great main A
mm,
plots.
mm,
Um, so it is something that I think has improved it. It's slowly we are no longer becoming, we are not becoming, we are no longer the B or C plot. We are A plot material. While One Day at a Time really did focus on Elena's sexuality, as an adult watching adult media, it's definitely becoming less of like, we only can tell coming out stories.
Yeah.
People can be a lesbian without it being their whole thing.
Yeah.
So that I think has been an improvement. But it's very mixed. I mean, you still have dead lesbians, you still have not so great representation, or very flat characters. You know, we're still not immune to the quote gay best friend. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But it's always I always feel like it's two steps forward, one step back with representation.
Yeah, and the figures are not great. I've got some more recent ones from GLAAD. Now, GLAAD, what does GLAAD stand for? Oh,
Gay?
I
Putting me on the
didn't.
spot here.
This isn't a test. Well, should we guess? Gay and lesbian? Something.
It's Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
They have some, listeners can look this up, and I'll put something in the show notes because neither of us have got our statistics to hand, but it's, let's admit it, it's quite a poor number. There isn't good representation across the board, and not just of gay and lesbian characters, but of trans characters and people of color are still really underrepresented, even though some of the best shows to come out, a lot of the Shonda Rhimes stuff and so on, helps, but that's not what we're mainly seeing, and so we're just I think people growing up are given stereotypes to base themselves on, so it's no wonder regardless of sexuality that that young people in general are having an identity crisis. It's like they don't look like any of these people out there really. And then we have some really sinister stuff coming in social media, and that none of us can get a handle on or get control of, and and I really feel concerned for young people today being pushed around even more, and some of the stuff that concerns me is the attachment of violence to sex, particularly straight sex and so on, but just this assumption that that's normal or okay, or to be expected, or to be put up with. So there are going to be people listening. I don't think that many teenagers will listen to my podcast, but their parents, their mums might be listening, and or might know young people, or women in their 20s and 30s might be listening, and I'm wondering if there's anything in terms of what you've been through, in terms of seeing stereotypes and then living a reality, if there's anything that you would say to them, if there's anything they can hold on to, or what's it like being in that sea of confusion, and how do you get through?
I'll speak to the sea of confusion because
Mm,
I think it can last longer than people expect.
mm,
And I think that something like sexuality, I can only speak to sexuality, is
mm,
changes as you go through it. I used to be one of the most annoying, I think it's annoying,
mm,
teenagers that was constantly like, well, I'm gay, I'm a lesbian, I'm, very vocal about it. And as I've
mm,
gotten older, I realized like, I don't think that's productive. So I guess all to say is that coming out, being a lesbian or being queer in general is it's a communal experience, but also a very individual experience. It all looks different. Everyone's experience is different, and there's no wrong way to do it. I think that even well-meaning, well-intentioned, like lesbian social media people, influencers, can kind of say blanket statements like this is a universal experience that every gay person has, and it's like, well, you're a lesbian living in LA with a vastly different experience than what my experience was living in Massachusetts as a kid. So I think there's no wrong way to be yourself. There's no wrong way to be a lesbian. There's no right way to do it either. I think it's just finding comfortability within yourself is kind of the most important thing, which sounds a little cheesy, but I think can be helpful to hear.
I think it really is helpful to hear. And, I think when I asked the question, I was thinking of, of women more your age, but you've said exactly what I'm saying every day to women of my age. And it is this, am I legitimate? Am I a proper lesbian? Am I and just one of the really nice bits when you're out the other side is what does a lesbian look like? She looks like this, she looks like that. And and it's just I never wanted to be out of the frying pan into the fire, in the sense of swapping one set of expectations and rules for a new set of expectations and rules. I'm just done with the rules, and done with living to other people's expectations. No, not because I'm rude or unfriendly, but just because it wears you out, it wears you down, and it affects your health, to carry a weight of other people's expectations. And we need to, as part of our personal growth, is look at those expectations and see the ones that we hold and the ones that we hold unconsciously, and say, I'm going to keep that standard because that is a good standard. Let's be kind, for example. Be kind. I'll keep that one, but I'm not keeping the one that says, I don't know. Well, the one that says take the smallest piece of cake on the plate, that's that. I'm not, but I'm not going to put myself down, and I'm not going to put up with stuff. And I think that this is something that we can all do for each other, because you were saying about some of the influencers, for example, and I just happened across a thread the other day, and somebody said, shave or no shave, body hair or no body hair, and there was some really extreme, sort of, there was revulsion at your lesbian lover having body hair, and revulsion at your lesbian lover shaving, and it was like, and I just thought, why don't we mustn't do this to each other. We should, it's like, we just, we need to support each other, and we need to, be ourselves. And, if we can, love and support each other for who we are, then we're getting there. We're beginning to understand what lesbian community is about, and we're not going to get through the next however many years it is, without having that community, and to be arguing or psychologically hurting people over our hairy legs, is just it's and that really does come from the straight culture, I believe, and but we've all grown up in this culture, so we all have some of it in us, but I think what we have to do is bring that out into the open and put the blame back where it belongs, not on each other, but on the brainwashing that has come to us. So the first bit of lesbian visibility was invisibility. There weren't any. And then when they came in, as you've written in your thesis, they were like almost like the devil, or they got killed off. They were the expendable person. They were like the, when in Star Trek, when they go down to a different planet, is it the ones in the blue shirts that always get killed or something? But the gay was the gay person, became that in so many other, sorts of shows. And then it's moved from the dead lesbian to the femme lesbian. What sort of lesbian would you like to be the dominant lesbian, really, in shows in 10 years' time?
I would love a butch resurgence.
Mm,
I want, but like a good, not the stereotypical butch that we
mm,
used to see that
mm.
was very hateful.
Yeah.
I want butch women writing butch women. I feel like we have not
Mm,
seen that
yeah.
um, in a very long time. I feel like Orange
Mm,
is the New Black had pretty
yeah.
okay butch representation. I know some people had an issue with, there's always conversations about character representation.
Yeah.
Something that I think is good, someone else would be bad, but I would love to see more of that. I would love to see a breaking of this mold of two straight actresses just pushing their faces against each other and calling it
Yeah.
kissing.
Yeah.
I think that's why when you just see a good on-screen kiss, it like goes viral in the lesbian community
Mm,
because you're like,
mm,
you are two actors who know how to sell
mm,
this.
mm,
I would love to see more middle-aged lesbians.
mm.
As I'm in my 30s, I don't care about high schoolers anymore.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
go to math class. I don't care who you like, you
Mm,
know?
mm,
So I
mm,
definitely would love to see more adults, but specifically middle-aged lesbians. I think more late in life lesbian stories are so
mm,
important and are
mm.
so invisible.
Yeah.
I thought of one example of not even a late in life lesbian. In Supergirl, there's a
Mm,
character who's like 28 when she realizes that she's a
mm,
lesbian.
mm, mm, mm,
So I think those are the two big ones. I think it's just more butch women, more
mm.
middle-aged women. Um, yeah, I just think there's so many facets of the lesbian identity and lesbian culture that are not celebrated or explored
Yeah.
that I want to see. We're not just straight women pretending to be gay for television.
Well, you made a point about the writers, and that's something that's been occurring to me the whole time we've been talking, which is it has to come back to we need more lesbian writers because how can somebody write lesbian if they're if they're going to be seeing it through the straight lens. And this is a little bit of a diversion, but we were late up last night because we were watching a show, and of course we binge watched it all the way through, and it's a BBC one, set in Sheffield, which is obviously where this podcast is coming from. And so we wanted to see all the streets and the places that we know, and I really would recommend it, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. But the author, the playwright, the film, what do we call
The
them?
writer,
Yeah, the
the
writer,
screenwriter.
the screenwriter, was deaf, and the whole show was a bilingual show. And we did have a lesbian in there, and she didn't die. She was fabulous. But they had a lot of the cast were deaf. A lot of the production assistants and the people around on set were deaf. They had this thing called a whisper set up so that everybody could hear what was being signed, and some of the well-known actors were learned this fabulous signing and acting together, and yeah, and the main actor has been deaf since birth, and it was you know, I can't tell you how powerful and impactful the whole thing was, and how I saw something through a different lens. So we switched on to sort of go, oh, there's Red Myers Road, and there's, there's Hunter's Bar, and so on, and we ended up just seeing the world through different eyes. So I'm thinking that, it's the screenwriters we need. Maybe we need to get in touch with Carrie Hunter, who's going to be out, I think, the podcast before you, and see if she'll screenwrite some of her fabulous crime novels into screenplay. And I really recommend, I think you might enjoy her crime novels, because they're just ordinary women. It just happens that they're smart, intelligent, strong, quite, not overly dramatic, and they partner with women. And that's, I think that's very similar to what you're saying. That's what we want. That's what we want to watch on TV. And I really hope that we are moving towards that. What do you think? We're not here to talk directly about the politics of 2025, but there've been some big changes, and I suppose I'm thinking that you said, I'm going to do a dissertation on lesbian, a thesis on lesbian representation in TV. I mean, that sounds very much like DEI, doesn't it? Sort of stuff. Do you think that students are gonna want to study these things? Do you think they're gonna get supported and supervised to study these things going forward? Don't you know?
I hope so. I am always just a painful optimist, which I know not everyone loves to hear. I hope so. I think it will still be challenging. Even just my pitch, I know ended up just getting a sponsor for it is always difficult. Even just to write like a thesis not about lesbian representation. And I love my thesis advisor, I should say, was incredible, and he was so supportive through the whole thing. He was very excited about it as well. I hope so. I think it's just going to be, it depends on what they're putting their spotlight on. I feel like every week it changes, and it's just a lot of chaos, purposeful chaos, intentional chaos on their part. We'll just have to see. I think it's just, I hate using the word evergreen, but it is just like an evergreen topic. Representation across the board is something that I think is always in discussion within community groups. So I think there will always be a need. There will always be people doing research, because there's been people doing research, for decades now. So I'm hopeful that it will still continue, even if it's a little bit more difficult.
Well, your work has helped me enormously, and I'm hoping that my book is going to help people enormously. And we have to trust that the ripple effect of our interest and our concern and our love for people being who they authentically are, and being comfortable in their own skin, we have to hope that makes a difference in the long term. That, and this community that's seems to be strengthening, and I suppose things do under oppression, don't they? But it's been really lovely to make this link just much more real than we've talked a bit on LinkedIn, and that's it. But it's been really lovely to make this a more real link with you, and I hope that you've got something out of sharing your work with us today.
Of course, yeah, I'm happy I could help. That was the whole reason I published it. I was like, I hope this can help other people, because it's so frustrating. The research process is so frustrating, and I'm very excited for your book as well. I think it'll be very helpful. And yeah, this was great. Thank you for setting this up, because it was very nice going back to a thesis I wrote 4 years ago. And, you write something for so long, you don't want to look at it again. But it was nice to revisit. It was nice to be reminded of, there are positives that are coming out of this. It isn't all doom and gloom representation wise. So
where would this take you in a dream world where you could, move into any career that you wanted? Where would your work and your interest and your passion take you?
Oh, I have so many directions. I feel like every few months I'm like, oh, I should do this. I still one day I think it'd be really cool to get a PhD and be a professor, but I'm sure as you're aware, the higher education system in the US is stupidly expensive. And so maybe one day I would love to take this and expand it, go more in depth with certain things. I did not touch supernatural television shows very intentionally for this, because that's a whole other beast. And I was like, I don't want to dive into that, but something like that, or, I'm not sure. I try to take it. I learned a lot during this thesis. I learned a lot about, like watching TV with a critical lens, watching anything with a critical lens, but also really understanding intention behind it, and also understanding there are writers behind it. There's a production team behind it. There are producers. There's the company head. There's so many people behind these things that a lot of time people's frustration with, oh, well, they didn't go as far as I wanted them to go. It's like, well, because someone down the line said no. And I think just having better perspective on how TV works as a business, I think really helps me understand representation as well. But we'll see. I feel like I said, I'm so scatterbrained about career goals. Who knows? Just trying to live one day at a time.
Belonging to families, community and society is a huge advantage in life for those who are not othered, that is, those not in minority groups. Making ourselves palatable is less interesting to many of us as we age, but as I discussed in a previous episode with Carrie Hunter, it's a calculated risk as well. In these times, and in Michaela's country at the moment, there's a danger in visibility as well as a real bonus in terms of well-being for the whole of society. Show producers need to take professional and financial risks. These are the risks that women coming out or living out already are taking all the time. Being unpalatable is financially risky for physical safety, and can be isolating. Visibility has had a part to play in making it safer for many of us. If representation is key to how we see ourselves and each other, it puts responsibility on anyone who creates content, myself included. As I'm working on the writing that I want to complete by the end of my career, talking with Michaela, whose writing is earlier on in her life, I'm really heartened to reflect on the quality and the standard of research and thinking in the women coming after me. It's a comfort to connect with others while the representation grows. And for a moment, I don't feel under that cloud of worry. I feel some of Michaela's optimism, some of her energy about the future. I'm wondering what I could see through different eyes today. And I'm wondering what listening to Michaela brings up for you. Thank you for listening to Women of Steel, created and hosted by me, Miriam Grace, psychotherapist at Blue Skies. If you'd like to know more about my work as a therapist and writer, you can follow me on social media. Please take a look at the show notes for information and contact details. And in the meantime, be kind to yourself.